Hello, everybody, and welcome into Gamecock Central. Kendall Smith and Wes Mitchell back at it with another edition of the Recruiting Rundown. And Wes, what a weekend it was for South Carolina! A massive win over Texas A&M. The field was stormed. You were there. Were you on the field after the game, Wes?
I did not go on the field. But by the way, Kendall, I have hyped this up to be the greatest episode of the recruiting rundown of all time. So no
Where did you hype
pressure
it up? Did you go
to
to
you. I
Exodus?
texted you. I
Oh,
said the
just me.
greatest one of all time. So I didn't hype it up to the people, but I'm just putting it out there. I don't really know why, but it's just they've been on such a roll in Columbia right now that I'm like, let me bottle some of that up and just keep the momentum going, just like South Carolina is trying to keep the momentum from the football field over onto the recruiting trail.
I like that. I like how you just tied all of that together. And yes, the energy is incredible right now surrounding the South Carolina football program. And people within the program don't just recognize it, it's the fans, it's the recruits, which is what we are talking about here today on Gamecock Central. Want to start off by talking about official visitors. 7 of them this past weekend, 4 of those guys uncommitted to South Carolina. You got feedback from them, Wes. What's the word?
Yeah, and a great place to start because obviously when you're taking those official visits, this is if you're the school, you're trying to kind of put all your cards on the table. If you're the student athlete, you're trying to get all the final information you need to make a decision. And the interesting thing with a few of these guys, primarily 2 of them, 2 local guys, they are like really truly in the final stages of the recruiting process. And so let's start with Donovan Murph right down the road at Irmo High School, 4-star wide receiver. As South Carolina fans know, he reclassed from 2026 to 2025. He told me he is eyeing December 4th, so exactly a month from right now for his final decision. And we really felt like South Carolina was in a great spot here going into the official visit. Feel no differently now. Had a great trip, had his family with him, just obviously got to experience that atmosphere. That was when we talked, it was really just about the atmosphere. That's kind of what stood out to him. He said he was grateful that he got to experience it kind of with his family. It was just kind of a special weekend, special day for them. He was on the field prior to the game. I think he stormed the field as well with everybody after, and also spent a lot of time with Jordan Gidron, who was also on his official visit that's already committed to South Carolina, and Malik Clark, who was there unofficially that's committed to South Carolina. All 3 are 4-star wide receivers, and those guys have really just connected and kind of bought into the idea of playing together. So South Carolina, I think the firm favorite there for Murph, may take a Clemson official visit before he makes his decision. So that is something to keep an eye on, Kendall. But certainly Gamecock should feel good about where they're at right now. Another local guy from Dutch Fork High School, we talked about him in the lead in, Josh Smith, 3-star linebacker, a guy South Carolina has prioritized down the stretch. Very soon after everyone is seeing this, he is going to make his decision on Tuesday. Gamecocks in great shape there. He named them his on-the-record leader after the visit, quickly set his decision. So there's really not a whole lot of wonder there, I guess you would say. Like, he's not really hiding it. Gamecocks in great shape there, and somebody that's had, I would say, a phenomenal senior season at Dutch Fork High School, Shrine Bowl selection, and someone that South Carolina, assuming everything goes through on Tuesday, will be very happy to get. The other 2 guys that I think you would put more in the category, Kendall, of the Gamecocks showed them a great weekend and gave them plenty to think about would be Georgia Tech offensive line commitment Jimmy Bryson, who was in from Baylor School in Tennessee. He had a great trip, of course, like everybody. Talked about the atmosphere, loved it, loved the coaching staff, loved the game day operation, just sort of loved everything about it. And still committed to Georgia Tech, but again, I'll use that phrasing. Just Carolina gave him a lot to think about in terms of the opportunity to come in, be part of something special, play in the SEC. And then a kid that I haven't just gotten as much direct feedback either on or from would be the JUCO defensive lineman, Kelton McKell. From what I understand, he did have a good time. He was very engaged. He was asking questions. He was learning more about the program, but just do not have that direct feedback yet to where I can sort of tell fans exactly where he may be leaning. But again, I would say Gamecocks gave him a lot to think about. He's someone that Chris Clark and I are going to be trying to get more information on as the week progresses in terms of where South Carolina is with him.
Well, I love that you brought up the atmosphere, Wes, because that is something that I've seen all over social media. In fact, I've seen other accounts from different schools, of course, these being like fan accounts, talking about how they were watching the South Carolina game and how their schools need to get on the same page as South Carolina when it comes to the type of environment that Williams-Brice Stadium has. So, really glad that the recruits were able to see that. And, it wasn't just the guys that were there on official visits, but guys there on unofficial visits as well. What kind of feedback did you get from them, Wes?
Yeah, and there's probably too many to even talk about here, but let's focus on a couple of top targets, namely one for 2025 who has been on campus a lot here lately from right down the road from here in Columbia, from Hammond School, three-star tight end Mike Tyler, who is currently committed to LSU, but has been on campus now several times and really has emerged as South Carolina's tight end target in this class. So I think the Gamecocks are in a for a guy that's committed to another school, they're probably in about as good of a spot as you can be at this point. They've gotten his attention. He has their attention. Lots of mutual interest there. And so he's a guy to watch as we move forward within this 2025 class, Kendall. And another kind of just interesting little note would be that Zay Hardy, the JUCO defensive tackle, who was at one point committed to South Carolina a couple of years ago, is currently committed to Mississippi State as a JUCO prospect, was back in town for the game as well. Don't have any direct feedback there, but that is more a matter of, hey, if he's visiting again, that is something for us to monitor. And the Gamecocks obviously trying to make a little run at him as well.
Okay, 2025 class is really shaping out, looking great for South Carolina. We've talked about the 2026 guys quite a bit here on the recruiting rundown, and we can't leave them out here today either. So, in terms of guys in that 2026 class that were at South Carolina this past weekend, got to take it in and experience a massive win for the Gamecocks over Texas A&M. Anything on that front, Wes?
Yeah, and there's a bunch of them, Kendall. I would start with a guy by the name of Darius Gray, who I think is someone that it's a name fans need to know. He's a four-star offensive lineman out of Virginia, and he consistently, despite being out of state, consistently visits South Carolina quite a bit, has been to several games, and consistently just gives very high praise that you would say is probably a little above and beyond the typical praise that you get from recruits after visits. And we know South Carolina has continued to recruit incredibly well on the offensive line. So he would be another one. It's still early, but I think South Carolina is in a really good position for Ryan Mosley, a four-star athlete from Carrollton, Georgia. He raved about the environment to Steve Wiltfong, who's one of our national guys over at On 3. South Carolina got Carson Baker in, who is an On 300 running back. Also talked about the environment. Trey Taylor, who's a big-time quarterback for that 2026 class. He's 2027, I think. Yeah, he's 27. So you're already kind of seeing the foundational elements of getting in with these younger prospects. And something we talked about in the lead into this season, Kendall, you got to have some success after the 5-7 season last year on the field because you have positioned yourself to land some really good players, but you're going to need for them to see that progress on the field, in my opinion, in order to completely buy into what the program is all about and what they're doing and what the future is. So to me, for them to see it, a lot of them in person on Saturday and just see that, I mean, the stadium was packed. Like there's not all sellouts are created equal. Like this was a legitimate sellout, like fans just every corner of the stadium and great atmosphere, great product on the field. For them to see some young players like Lenoris go do their thing as well, it was really just a great opportunity for South Carolina, but one that in this case they were able to take advantage of. And so I think as long as they can finish this year on the field on a high note, this could be something that has a long lasting effect. This win could be on South Carolina's recruiting.
Yeah, they said on television that Williams-Brice was actually over capacity on Saturday. So they have X amount of seats, and there were more people there than that. And I have to say, watching it from my couch at home, South Carolina looked great on TV. I mean, just from a recruiting standpoint, even if you're someone that wasn't at the game that weekend or on a visit, but South Carolina has interest in you and you got a glimpse of that game and what it looked like, I think it probably created a sense of FOMO. It certainly did for me. Like, you're missing out on this experience, and it's one of a kind. Nighttime at Williams-Brice Stadium, a huge win for South Carolina. You were there. You're obviously saying it was incredible. All of the recruits that were there that have talked to you and Chris Clark are saying it was incredible. So what a weekend for South Carolina, truly. And we built it up so much going into it. Obviously, massive recruiting weekend for South Carolina and a lot at stake. And I think they certainly rose to the occasion. So that's something to be very proud of for the Gamecocks. And a couple more weeks left at home for South Carolina this season. So you bet that they'll have some recruits at those games as well. And we will keep you updated on all of it. But Wes, really appreciate you. I think this was the best recruiting rundown yet. We have so many great things to talk about. The vibes are high. Everything's positive. What do you think? Best one yet?
Yeah, we're gonna say it was tied for the best one yet. No disrespect to our other ones that we've done, but let's set the table to beat it next time, Kendall, because
Well, what's
we're
it
gonna
tied
accept.
with?
I mean, last week's obviously, and then the week before that, and then the week. But no, we got plenty. It's always good when you have just great content to talk about, So,
Mm-hmm.
um, good recruits, great players, big win. And you really you only get so many of these big opportunities like this. And we know it kind of slipped through their fingers against LSU earlier this year. So to just go out there and do it, and to do it in decisive fashion at the end,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's special. That's something the recruits they pay attention to, and a lot of the guys were talking about Lenoris too. Like, just
Yeah.
hey, this kid looks special too. So I think Shane Beamer, that staff, they have a lot of positives to point to right now, and we know Shane's a positive guy already. So now you give him that ammo, and this thing is really setting up well for them down the stretch and then into that 2026 class.
Well, all I have to say is Wes Mitchell was at the game this past weekend. And don't worry, everybody. He will be at the game this upcoming weekend in Nashville, Tennessee, South Carolina against Vanderbilt. Wes, you're going to party on Broadway if South Carolina wins and becomes bowl eligible, which they actually did that 2 years ago, my senior year, and they became bowl eligible in Nashville, Tennessee. So maybe history will repeat itself this weekend. But we will, as always, keep you guys posted on everything you need to know regarding South Carolina football, regarding all of the sports. Basketball starts, which we are super excited about as well. So visit us at GamecockCentral.com. Follow us on social media at Gamecock Central. And thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Again, for Wes Mitchell, I'm Kendall Smith. Have a great rest of your week, everybody, and we will see you soon.